Well, I'm joined now by the Guardian columnist Owen Jones, man who's quite well plugged into Team Corbyn thinking. I mean, give us your sense of what Jeremy Corbyn has got to do today.
I think firstly he has to show actually the Labour Party is far more united than people give it credit for. It's not like the 1980s where there were really big ideological confrontations going on investment in the economy, on comprehensive education rather than secondary moderns, on a publicly funded, properly resourced National Health Service. We could go on. There's actually a large degree of consensus. So he needs to make that clear without, because all we've had for the last 3 months is Labour Party navel-gazing. So we can't have a speech that's just about managing the internal affairs and divisions of the Labour Party. So he has to show he can reach beyond the people who turn up to rallies, the people who've joined the Labour Party, the middle-income voter who works in an office in Nuneaton, for example, to pick a place from thin air. And that's talking about things like home ownership as well as building council housing. It's talking about older voters who Labour have hemorrhaged support since 1997, as well as a younger generation that fears they'll be worse off than their parents.
Can he do that? Because already this morning we've seen this row over immigration and his suggestion that you don't need to tackle numbers, and that fuels a sense that Mr. Corbyn is good at speaking to his own people, he's good at speaking to a metropolitan audience, but can he really communicate beyond that?
Well, immigration is an example of a division, I suppose, going throughout the natural Labour coalition, because if you take big cities, Birmingham, Manchester, Liverpool and so on, people are more well disposed towards immigration, particularly younger voters. It's in places like where I grew up in Stockport, smaller towns, older working class voters in particular, where there's often quite a lot of resentment about immigration. So you have to bring that coalition together. What he has to say is, look, we just had a referendum which was more about immigration than anything else. He understands people's concerns. People don't mind disagreeing with them so much if they think that there's at least an understanding and appreciation for where people are coming from. And that's why I think making front and central this idea of a migrant impact fund the Tories abolished, so the places with higher levels of immigration get extra resources to cope with pressure, for example, on public services, to talk, for example, about English language services, which have been cut because of a lack of investment in public services. So I think just making that front and central, we will deal with your concerns, we understand them, we're not going to set arbitrary limits, because the previous government did that and failed and undermined people's faith in politics by doing so, but we will address these concerns, we do understand them.
And let's talk performance, because it is a performance today, and we played some of the clips of famous speeches by the likes of Neil Kinnock. Does Jeremy Corbyn have the ability to deliver that sort of performance? Because, I mean, everything I've seen of him, I mean, he doesn't really do those big moments, does he?
Well, I think he's capable of them, actually. And I think, actually, for example, if you take the acceptance speech this year compared to when he won last year, there's a marked improvement. And obviously, he was someone who never expected to become a leader.
Do you think we exaggerate the importance of that sort of huge oratorical tour de force? People aren't really that bothered by it?
Are you suggesting the media focus too much on style than substance? As if, come off it. I think what he needs to do above all else, actually, is have a speech which is soaked in optimism. I don't often quote Ronald Reagan, obviously, but he, for example, had this very optimistic kind of morning in America. If Jeremy Corbyn does a speech which says, look at the great things this great country has achieved, the NHS, the welfare state, overcoming tyranny in World War II, moments of great courage and determination, and to draw on those great traditions, that if Britain is united behind a common purpose, we can build a better sort of society, make people feel good about themselves. People like me on the left sometimes come across as a bit miserable, a bit dour. If you make people think, well, actually, there's so much to be proud of in this country, the rights and freedoms our ancestors fought for, let's build on that and look at the great society, one of the richest countries on earth could build, that provides for all. And I think if he makes people feel good and optimistic, in a country which I think is sick of division after a very acrimonious referendum campaign, if he can say, whether we voted Remain or Leave, we want the same things and we want to build a better society.
I heard Jeremy Corbyn being interviewed this morning, and he kind of riled a bit when he was asked if he thought there was a comparison between him and Donald Trump. But maybe there is, in the sense that Jeremy Corbyn is a very different sort of politician. He's not business as usual. I wonder if he's kind of almost an anti-politics figure, and maybe that is what people like about him, that he is not the normal politician. That's his strongest suit, and maybe that's what he ought to play up to.
Well, Donald Trump's a demagogue who calls Mexicans rapists and criminals, so I think there was quite a clear difference between the two. But it's obviously the case that there is a anti-politics mood sweeping the Western world. You can't look at the rise of Jeremy Corbyn without looking at what's happened in the United States, Bernie Sanders, Donald Trump, also across Europe, new insurgent anti-establishment parties. He's obviously part of that. I think one of the reasons he emerged in the way he did is because there was a vacuum waiting to be filled. The old party establishment with Labour no longer had a clear, coherent vision, and actually I think a lot of the more kind of perceptive and reflective elements of the old order, if you like, of the Labour Party understand that. But I think what he has to do is tap into that point, which is to say, look, Britain is sick of an old, professionalised, scripted sort of politician. I'm not that kind of politician. You've got to turn things which are used often to attack you into your strengths. And one of the things that people are sick of in Britain is that idea of a certain type of politician. If he can say, I'm a different sort of guy, and you know, in a country which likes people like Nigel Farage, I'm not comparing him to him either, then I think that's something which can turn a weakness, I suppose the media would say, into a strength.
We know much of the speech is going to be about unity. He's going to call for an end to trench warfare in the Labour Party. But is he really going to be able to do it? Or are there people in his party who probably are never going to come on board with Jeremy Corbyn because they profoundly disagree with his politics? They're not there to become part of Team Corbyn, whatever he says.
Well, his critics are not homogenous. You have some MPs who just don't like his politics. That's obviously the case. But most MPs actually are, frankly, they don't have massive political disagreements with Jeremy Corbyn. They do have concerns, yes, about whether he could win an election. They worry about keeping their own seats. They worry about competence. They worry about messaging. But actually, again, on those issues, there isn't much difference. So I think what he needs to do is separate the irreconcilables, if you like, and love bomb the rest. And that means give and take. I think, for example, whilst MPs need to accept the democratic verdict of the members, why not partly elected shadow cabinets? No more talk of mandatory reselections, for example. I think then actually a lot of the kind of middle ground of the Parliamentary Labour Party, that would assuage their concerns. And the main thing he has to do is show he's got an election-winning strategy, a clear, coherent strategy that reaches beyond the party faithful. That's what he's got to show he can do.
Do you think Jeremy Corbyn enjoys being leader now? I mean, I heard him yesterday saying it was fun. But whenever I see him being interviewed by the media, and I expect before this speech today, you get the sense, he's really not that comfortable with it.
Well, who'd want to be leader of the opposition? It's one of the most miserable job I can even imagine. And I think actually, look, I mean, I suppose probably if you're in his position, it's great to be part of something that feels like a very exciting mass movement, to see lots of particularly energised young people who otherwise weren't involved in politics. But if you're battered every single day by people on your own side and by the media, I can imagine that probably is fairly exhausting. But to be honest with you, I think with Jeremy Corbyn, he's somebody who stood out of a sense of duty. I don't think anyone could accuse him of being a careerist. He spent much of the last 40 years in the doldrums, on the very periphery of politics within the Labour Party. And I think probably, you know, despite his often things which went wrong, not least because he didn't want to be leader. That's why things have often gone wrong, I suppose. But actually, I think he just feels a sense of duty. He feels it's his responsibility to fight for the causes that the people elected him to fight for.